the thing that gets pushed the most on therapists in grad school. It's the most widely studied modality of therapy. And the idea behind cognitive behavioral therapy is that we end up engaging in a negative spiral because we have these cognitive distortions, right? And so the easiest one is, catastrophizing, which we all have a tendency to do, where, one minor thing happens, but then your mind spirals and you're like, well, this happened, so that means this is going to happen, and then that's going to happen, and now it's the end of the world, right? And that cognitive distortion leads to some type of negative emotion, like anger or sadness or whatever it is, and then that leads into a behavior that's fed from that emotion. So I'm going to give up, I'm going to isolate, I'm going to rate, whatever it is, right? And then the end result of that behavior reinforces the negative thought, right? Because it's like almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so the idea behind cognitive behavioral therapy is, how do we interrupt that cognitive distortion and reframe it and challenge it into something that's more adaptive, that's more.
This is the Veritable Veteran Podcast, bringing truth and exposure to the struggles veterans and their families face post-military. Depression, anger, PTSD, suicide. Who am I? What do I do now? How do we fix it? And that sounds like a massive, question that there's no way we could answer that right now. But let's say I wanted to get, and this is something that I've considered doing, and I'm still potentially considering doing, getting a license to be a therapist and getting my master's degree in, clinical counseling. Well, and that's I kind of want to, and I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do. I haven't decided, but let's just say I did, and I get my license. How difficult is it, and what are the hurdles to opening your own business? And I have a follow-on question for that, but can you answer that? Like, what would it look like? Are you a licensed therapist, or are you like a psychiatrist or psychologist?
No, I'm an LCMHC, which is licensed clinical mental health counselor. So I have a master's degree, not a doctorate.
Okay. So you're like in the exact same route that, I would potentially be taking.
Yeah, I settled for a master's. I didn't want to do a dissertation.
So. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Gag.
Yeah. So realistically, you're looking at 2 to 3 years for the master's program, depending on the program that you're in. And then after you graduate, you have to work for 2 years under supervision before you can apply for your own individual license. And in most states, you can't open your own practice while you're pre-licensed. So you have to wait until you have your own individual license. So it would be about 4 to 5 years from when you started your program if you finished it on time and then immediately did the 2 years. And then from there, it's not, I don't want to say it's not hard, because everyone always says that it is, but my brain just doesn't work the same. It's not hard in the sense, it's tedious, and it's like there's a lot of tasks that need to be done, and it's a lot of hurry up and wait, but it's not like, I guess, strenuous or like difficult. It's you register the business with the state that you're in. You get some type of address that you can utilize. It can't be a PO box for insurance companies. You set up a CAQH profile. You start paneling with insurance companies if you choose to. COVID really shifted a lot of that for a lot of people. Before COVID, insurance companies wouldn't pay for telehealth services at the same rate. So like if they would normally pay you $100 for an in-person session, they'd pay you $40 for a telehealth session. So people just didn't do it because there was no way to make a living off of it. But then COVID happened, and the government made it completely impossible for an insurance company to go back and do that, though they've tried multiple times because they can't help themselves. And so that really shifted the game for group practices, because now anyone with a license could just set up shop in their basement, which honestly, some days I'm like, yeah, that would have been the ticket. But yeah, so it's not super difficult to do. the biggest bulk of the work is just getting through the grad program, getting your hours in, and getting your license. And then from there, I mean, you could be up and running as a solo practitioner, especially if you didn't take insurance within a day. You make a website, you make a Psychology Today profile, and then get your
So
client referred.
if you didn't do insurance, you just never touched it. Just like not even gonna go there. And just had it was just a single individual person set up in we have a building on our property. I set up here, right? And charge significantly less than what a typical therapist would charge. Do you see that as something that's feasible, doable, sustainable?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. And I mean, that's really like when you look at like the cost breakdown, like for me as a group practice owner, my cheapest insurance pays me $99, $97 for a session. Uh, Per insurance contracts, my out of pocket cost has to be more than that. So the cheapest I could charge anyone technically is $97. Otherwise, I'm violating that. And because they won't, basically, the insurance doesn't want to pay me more than what I would charge someone if they didn't have insurance.
I want to
Because
fight every insurance
I know.
company. Like
Listen,
The more
I'm
you hear
serious. I
about it,
just
the
like
worse it gets.
I know, and I was watching something online, today. And again, this is why I can't spend too much time on the internet because they're talking. They're asking these insurance companies like who owns these medical. If you own an insurance company, raise your hand. If you're a medical service provider, raise your hand. Keep your hand up if you also own a pharmacy and a doctor's office. And it's like they own everything.
sure.
And
Well,
it
that's like so GoodRx is actually owned by insurance companies. So you get the discounted prescriptions, but you're still paying the insurance company anyway. So they still get the money.
Yeah. Well, and the big thing is they have enough money to get federal laws written, so you have to have
yeah
insurance or whatever else.
yeah.
And I don't condone um, assassinations of any
I was
type.
just thinking that. I was thinking the
However,
same thing. Yeah.
however,
Luigi. Yeah.
when
Yeah.
when things happen to CEOs of insurance companies that are notorious for ruining people's lives and taking all their money and not giving them the care that they said they'd give them or pay for them to get, I get it. I do,
Yeah.
and
I'm not saying
that's,
it's okay. I'm
I'm
not
not
saying
saying
I
it's okay, and
agree.
I'm not
I'm simply
condoning it.
saying I
However,
understand.
I understand.
However, yeah, it is
Yeah.
it is a semi-rational response to have that much anger and frustration and rage. I'm not
Yeah.
condoning, that
Nope.
behavior. However, I get it, and
Yeah.
I could understand
Maybe
where
he
it
could have.
comes
Maybe he
from.
could have let that out in some, therapy had they provided it
Yeah.
for him and actually paid for it.
Yeah,
Um,
or maybe in a legislative session and lawmakers would have changed things,
yeah.
sometimes
Exactly.
though, again, right, like not that dissimilar where guys like you and I feel like we have no way out except suicide. He felt he had no way out except that route that he took, and
Yeah.
and
Except
Yeah.
murder.
the problem
And
in front of him
it's
was the
yeah.
problem, and
Yeah. No,
he,
and I've had that conversation. And people were like, I just can't believe that he would ever do that. And I'm like, I can.
No, I could
Like, I
easily.
can 100% understand why he did it. Do I agree with it? No. Do I think it's the right answer? Not always. Violence is not always the right answer, and I understand that. I think in some cases it is. However, again, it's and it's like when you say that, you sound crazy because you're like, oh, well, you just think we need to go around and schwack all the health insurance CEOs. Like, no, that wouldn't solve the problem because they would just replace them with somebody
I was gonna
else.
say we're just
I'm
gonna get a
talking
new.
bigger. We need
yeah, I'm
there'd have to
talking
be
bigger.
a much larger uh operation, we'll call it anyway.
But it's
It's
like, I mean, we have so many friends who have children with severe medical
Yeah.
issues, and I see their Facebook posts talking about hours upon hours that they spend on the phone fighting with insurance companies to just get their child the basic
yeah,
things that they,
just to
medical.
live,
Yeah.
just to live.
Well, and then you have, then these families that have medically fragile children have to buy specific types of equipment for their kids, and that equipment is like through the roof expensive, and insurance won't even touch that equipment. Like they won't even offer anything to it. And it's like they literally make money off of they literally they see these medically challenged families, and they look at them as money pits. And it's
Well,
like,
and they're constantly evolving, right? Like, I mean, even 5, 6 years ago in mental health, like if you didn't take an insurance company, it was a fairly regular thing for clients to use out of network benefits. And most of the time, right? Like if you had a specific specialty that was harder to find, like EMDR or something like that, um, insurance companies would reimburse the client. I mean, 75 to 100% of the cost, right? Which worked out for us as the therapist because I can charge you like my total out of pocket cost. So I'm actually making more money than I would have if I was in network with your insurance company. And for the client, they're getting reimbursed the entire amount. So they're basically getting it for free.
right,
Um, Same as if they were using their insurance. And then the insurance companies started to notice that that was becoming more and more the case. And so then they started peeling that percentage back. So now instead of 75 to 100%, they'll cover 50 to 75%. And then it was 25 to 50%. And now most plans don't have out of network benefits at all. So they won't reimburse anything. And then when that didn't work, we started doing what was called single case agreements. So again, if Evan came in and I wanted to work with him, he needed to use his insurance, I'd fill out a relatively simple authorization form. I'd send it off to the insurance company. They'd say, yep, we'll pay you, but only for him, right? I can't advertise that I take the entire insurance company and start taking other people. But for this one client, sure, go ahead. And every year you'd have to renew it if you were still seeing the client. Sometimes they might say, oh, after this many sessions, you need to renew it. But it was, again, a relatively simple process. You fill out the form, you send it in, boom, there you go. Um, and then that became such commonplace, they stopped doing those. And so it's, again, every loophole or workaround that
yeah,
we would find, again, to try and keep clients in care, they would just cut it off at the knees every single time. And I mean, it's not just people coming straight into, like, a lot of people get their insurance through their job. And so if they change jobs or their job changes insurance companies, I mean, I've lost, I don't even know how many clients from that. Their employer goes on with a new insurance company. I'm not in network with it. They can't afford out of pocket. They don't have out of network benefits. I can't do a single case agreement. And so I've been working with this client for a year, 2 years, and now they have to go see somebody else because their employer changed insurance company, not because they did. Um, and so again, it's just time and time again, like they always find a way to ensure that they're not paying out because they're a business. At the end of the day, they have to make money. They don't make money if they're constantly paying out. If they can delay paying you for 6 months, that's 6 months of money that they just got, that they didn't have to pay out. And people like across the board are, getting the short end of the stick for that. Thanks.
um so so this is a uh, so insurance aside and all of that, I think we all agree that we hate insurance.
We need to
But
do
yes,
I would
how we
and
started
like
was you talking about could you charge less if
right.
you didn't have
Yeah.
insurance? And the answer is yes, you can.
Yes.
And because you're not dealing with insurance, you absolutely can. And essentially, the way long-winded, totally didn't even get their point that I was trying to make, and didn't, was that because you're not dealing with what an insurance company is going to reimburse you, it gives you that flexibility to set your own rate. And if you think about it, um, even if you charged $45 a session, $60 a session, you're getting paid 60 bucks an hour. It's just you. Most of the stuff, if you're a solo practitioner, you can write off your office space, your electric bill, your
Right.
internet bill, or,
Yeah.
telehealth
Yeah.
platform that you use. You can write off basically everything. And so it gives you a lot more flexibility and you can charge a lot less. And a lot of my friends that have their own solo practice, that's what they do. They don't take insurance, but they also take a certain amount of pro bono clients, so they're clients that they don't charge anything for, whether it's financial reasons or just whatever. Um, and so it does give you a lot more flexibility and it's sustainable for sure.
So here's an interesting question because I've always been curious about this. How do you keep your clients straight? Because I know one thing that he ran into with the one therapist he was going to, he said, feel like I'm constantly having to remind him
Oh yeah.
of my story. and who I am. He's like, every time I walk into that office, he's like, I feel like the first 20 minutes is spent just like reminding him of who I am.
Yeah.
And I mean, and he was going to his therapist weekly. So
Yeah.
like once
That's
a
bad.
week. And
Yeah.
So remember I talked about the
Yeah.
ones that suck at their job in our
So
Yeah.
day?
Yeah.
like what helps you keep your client's story straight, you know, like
See, and when you say
without
that, like, you're saying this right now and I'm listening to it, I'm like, I wouldn't have that problem. Like, I honestly believe that I
I
would
would.
not have that
My
problem.
ADHD
Like, I
brain would
so
see
I
people and
probably
like
would
that I've
struggle.
talked to, and like I like immediately like I'm like, oh yeah, I remember like everything. It's like my mind literally is a steel trap though of like dumb stuff. Like so
yeah.
again, if I could channel that into like remembering somebody's, like important things, like movie quotes, there's like every movie I've ever seen is in my
Endless
head.
wealth
He
of
And
them.
has a quote
like
for
so
everything.
Same.
it's just so like
His
I feel
version of
like
ADHD. Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
That's me with song
I
lyrics. That
Yes.
I'm
yeah.
like I'm like
We
a
have come
sleeper agent.
Yeah, yeah.
we have come to realize that we both have ADHD, just different levels and forms.
Yeah.
And
So
always
is that
opposite.
yes, yeah.
Yes.
So is that something that with your therapist, is that an issue that you have like with
For
them like
sure.
not okay. So
Yeah.
is that
So I
but is
mean,
that like a go ahead, sorry.
I think it's so for me, I'm like people talk about like the dessert stomach and like the regular stomach. I have like my brain and then I have my therapist brain. And they're not the same brain. And honestly, I'm pretty convinced they're not even interconnected in any way, shape, or form. Because I forget my coffee every day,
Oh,
all day.
all day, every day. I
He
literally
will
make
follow me
her.
around the
Yeah,
house with it.
our 3-year-old follows her around the house with it now. He's like, "Mommy, your coffee. Mommy, your coffee."
And I will put it down and I will never remember where I put it until I'm driving away. And I'm like, oh, I left it on the bathroom counter. Oh, I left it in Grant's room on his shelf. But anywho, my therapist brain, though, is a steel trap. And that thing is solid and it's ironclad. And I can have a client come back 6 years later and I'll still remember their college roommate's pet goldfish name just for no reason other than they said it the one time. Do I remember what I say in session all the time? Never. I have clients come back in, they're like, that thing you said was like really powerful. And I'm like, I love that.
It's like, "What did I say? Let me write that down."
I never
That
Yeah.
was
asked.
good.
I
That
never
was
Let me
good.
asked
write that
because
down.
Why
I
don't
don't
you
want to
tell me
know.
what it meant to you, but use
Yeah.
the words I said? So I
I don't ask what I said, but sometimes they'll tell me and I'm like, that sounds
That sounds like
mostly like what I would
fire.
say,
Yeah.
but I don't think I've
yeah.
said it quite like that. And so I think for me, it does come a little more naturally. I don't personally struggle with remembering like the tidbits that kind of get picked up along the way, but it is something that even a good therapist can struggle with, especially when you've been in the field long enough. Um, you would like people have very similar faces and they have similar stories, and I swear when you have multiple intakes in the same day they always look like they could be related, and their life story is relatively similar. Um, but I think that a lot of it just comes down to what works for you. There are therapists that, will maybe take notes in session. They're maybe a little more um, thorough in that. I think that a lot of it in this particular day and age is how much distraction and how much noise is coming into the space with you. Um, like, are you really attuned to your client? Are you really present with your client? I think that for sure, even the sessions that I may be a little more like internally distracted, I don't remember nearly as much as I probably could have if I was really in that space. And so that's a lot of what I work with the therapist that I have is, if you need to take notes, that's fine. How do we do it in a way that's not distracting from the session? How do we do it in a way that's still being mindful of like not putting too much into a session note? Again, just thinking ahead of like if this showed up in a courtroom or the client requested their chart and they were going to read it back, like we want to be mindful of those things. And so how do we kind of keep that in mind? And then also, how attuned are you really in this space? Like, are you really making sure you try to leave your stuff at the door, so you can really be fully present with that person and commit those things into your memory. And I think for the most part, kind of what you were describing your experience as, I think is a huge, huge red flag in terms of just not maintaining that level of, in my opinion, just respect for the client walking in the door. And I
Yeah.
also think that, like, giving ourselves grace of, like, does it really matter if you remembered what their dog's name was or that their child is 7 instead of 9? Like, there's plenty of times where I'm like, oh, your daughter's like 8-ish, right? And they're like, oh, 10. And I'm like, okay. And then we keep
Yeah.
going. And
Yeah, close
it's
enough.
not something where they're like, oh my God, she didn't remember that she was 10. Like, so
Well,
I think,
it was like
yeah,
where he felt like he was, like, having to remind the guy of who he was.
right. And that's a
And
whole different
it's like,
ball
dude,
game,
we
right?
literally just, like, we had a session last week, like
Right. And I think, again,
Yeah.
like, that to me is like, that's a therapist that's just, they're not paying attention. Like,
Yeah.
that's, if you're a client that walked in the door, you're another check in the box,
Yeah.
and I think when therapists get too wrapped up in, like, diagnostics and specific treatment plans and things like that, that's where that connection gets lost. And um,
Yeah. And
again,
it was, yeah, I also, there was some other red flags too. Like when he
yeah,
changed the price of he changed the amount he was charging and like didn't tell me and then like handed me the new contract and was like, here you go, like sign this. And I was like, this is like different.
and
And
he's like, I should
yeah,
probably read it first
yeah.
before I
And
sign
he
yeah,
it.
like never mentioned anything. And I read that he was like changed because I had been grandfathered in at the original price because we were
yeah.
paying out of pocket. And then it was like he changed it, and I was like, "So is this like the new fee for me, or is this just the new fee for like everybody else?" Because like, am I no longer grandfathered in? And he was like, "Oh yeah, you're not going to be grandfathered in anymore. This is the new price." And I was like, "Oh, that would have been nice to know."
Ew, that's so
Yeah,
gross.
yeah, and I didn't go back.
Yeah,
That
he
was the
didn't go
last
back
time I was
after
there.
that.
I
That
was
was the
like,
last
I
time
give,
he
like,
"Yeah,
3 months notice if I'm going to change anything. I'm like, hey, so
yeah."
in 90 days, we're going to do this thing. And
Yeah, and
then,
he had
Yeah.
been talking about like how he was not going to be accepting insurance and how he was going to be changing some things up, but he kept always saying, "Well, you're grandfathered in, so don't worry about it," and all this other stuff. And then all of a sudden, he's like, "Hey, if you can just sign this, this is like the new, like updated
Just
agreement."
sign
And
it.
I'm like, "Okay, yeah, just don't read it, don't
Yeah.
don't read the
Don't read the
fine
fine
print."
print.
I
Yeah.
was like, "Yeah, okay."
Make sure your credit card's got some, money on it first
Yeah,
too.
and
don't
I was
alarm
like,
that I'm
"Okay,
asking for your
I don't
social.
sign anything." Okay, I take that back. I generally don't sign, especially if it's involved like something like that. I'm gonna read what you hand me.
Right.
I'm not gonna.
Well, and I think what made it even more of a just like slap in the face, this therapist is a veteran himself, and like
He was Air Force.
he was he was Air Force, but but he was Air Force
Uh,
back when they actually like did stuff.
I mean, they still do, but
I
They
no
do.
mean,
offense to any Air Force people. No, I love the Air Force guys.
no,
Seriously,
it's just
he
fun to mess
he
with
was
him.
just he had his personality did not mesh well with mine, and
No,
he was kind of soft spoken, and um, he's a good. I'm sure he's a good dude, and I'm sure he's just trying to do what's best for him and his business and his family. And it was just I felt like he could have been a little more open and honest with
Yeah.
me up
Right.
front, because I wouldn't had he told me I have to raise the price because of X, Y, and Z, I'd have been like, okay, that's fine.
Yep.
Right.
Probably still not going to come because I won't be able to afford it. But I
Right.
appreciate the forthright honesty, just being upfront, not, hey, sign this piece of paper, but don't read it.
Well, yeah, it
Kind of,
feels
yeah,
shitty and underhanded. Yeah.
yeah, it was
yeah,
just, it was, that
yeah.
just felt gross. It was like, nah,
Yeah.
I'm not going to do this.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because he called me on his way home, and he's like, "Hey, babe, so this happened," and I instantly was like, "Nope, you're not going back."
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
Hey, see, at least you're ride or die, though.
Yeah. When do we fight him? And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
We
well,
ride at
and
dawn.
it was a big deal that I said that because I was very much like adamant about him continuing with this. I was like, continuing therapy. I was like, we will figure out how to pay for it, all of this stuff, and like, but the moment that happened, I was like, no,
No,
like
no.
we are trying to find ways to pay for this, and then if he's not going to be honest, in this, I was like, that's not someone that can be trusted. We're done. So,
She's
and
telling me to like pick up diesel fuel on the way home and like make sure you have some glass bottles. And I was like,
Yeah, get some
no,
foundation
that's
foam and diesel and a little two-stroke gas.
yeah.
that's not my style.
But yeah, so that, I mean, there's just, man, there's so many stories I can think of just now, just from people that I've talked to and even my own dealing with bad therapy, and bad therapists and I don't want to drag anybody's name through the mud. I'm not going to say anybody, obviously. I'm just saying there's been people that have told me that they've gotten just really stupid advice from therapists and just really bad, uh, I don't know,
So
they're just in it for the money,
yeah.
and then they, I don't know.
So
It's
one of my friends, her husband
yeah.
is
I was
Army.
thinking about him.
Yeah.
Like,
He's Army. He's retiring here pretty soon, and he's just been dealing with a lot of panic attacks and just like he'll get into these spirals, these mental spirals. And she messaged me the other day. And she and I were friends before she and her husband met and stuff. So we were college friends. And she said, so he's been seeing a therapist through the military,
Mm.
because he's still in.
No. Yeah.
And the therapist told him that when you start getting into your panic attacks or start getting into your mental spiral, just sorry, just rub your hands together really fast, and that'll help you get out of the panic attack.
What?
yeah,
Rub your
yeah.
hands together really fast.
I mean, I
Yeah.
guess maybe the
No.
friction, but no.
Don't try to. Don't try.
I guess no. Yeah, I don't think you can save that
If
one.
yourself with a pen, that might help too. I don't
That would
Yeah,
help
yeah.
more. That would.
Like,
That
I
would
want you
be
to just
more useful.
jab your thumb into your eyeball,
Yeah.
and that'll
Well,
that'll
people
help.
do like the
know.
rubber band on
Yeah,
or
yeah.
the hair elastic, and that there is
Yep.
science behind
Yes,
that.
okay,
Yes.
there are things, like, and I can kind of see the whole, it's like you're, like, the releasing of energy, like,
But
the
no.
releasing of nervous.
Yeah.
But I was
Yeah.
like, she's sent that to me, and she goes,
Having a panic attack.
Yeah. What are you doing? I'm having a panic attack. Hold on.
Well, I
and
mean, like,
Ah.
she said that was literally the only thing the therapist told him. The therapist said, just do this and you'll be fine. And she's like, Lydia,
totally fine.
what?
And people wonder why
I wouldn't
people like
recommend
crash
that.
out and
But,
like
yeah,
and just and like assault people, you
Yeah.
know, and like or take a gun and murder an insurance CEO, like, and it's like y'all wonder why, because you say stupid stuff like that, and it's like, you can't be serious, like you have to be joking, like there's no way. And
Well, and that was like my experience with the VA. So I don't know if you know this, but if you work for the VA as a brand new therapist, they'll pay for your tuition.
Yeah.
Or they'll pay off your degree after a certain
Yep.
amount of years.
Yep.
And so there's
they
a
do the
lot
same
of
thing with regular doctors too.
right, for sure. And there's a reason why there's a lot of doctors that suck at what they do and therapists
Yeah.
that suck at what they do at the VA. I went to the VA for my therapy. And this is while I was still like $150 a session out of pocket to the VA for something that was a VA problem, but we'll table that part. And she literally was like, "Oh my God, really? That happened?" As I'm trying to share my story. And I'm like, "Yeah, no, now I feel like a freak, on like at the circus." And then her her homework for me was to write an essay about why everybody hated me and why it was my fault. Like, okay. And yeah, okay.
I think this is a really good segue into the different types of therapy and why they work for different people.
Yeah.
AKA, no one knows what to say about what you just dropped into this space right now. So we're gonna shift
Oh,
away from
Yeah.
that.
wow. But yeah, so the one thing that people have been asking me, because I'm encouraging people like to go and get therapy, and they're like, well, talk therapy doesn't work. I talked for, hours and hours and hours, and it just made it worse. And I'm like, okay, well then maybe you need to try something else,
Mhm.
something different.
Yeah.
And then they're like, what? And I'm kind of like, well, I'm not a licensed
Something
therapist,
else.
so I'm not going to give you like advice on what, but I'm literally like sending people like, for example, it's silly, but like I will literally at some points I've Googled like different types of therapy, and it just gives me a list, right? And I'm like, and I'll send them the list. I'm like, listen, just look, and there's other options. Like, you gotta. Some of these people they're helpless. I mean, and it's, I try to help these guys or girls, and I'm like, the prime example I use is I had to give the guy the number to call the GI Bill. like the education hotline because he didn't know the number to call. And I was like, dude, it's like 2025. You didn't think to
Google it.
just Google it? Like, it's
Right.
literally 1888 GI Bill. Like, then that's the number. So, I mean, I understand, like, he was at a point where he was just like giving up, and, you know, he was
And
super
so
frustrated.
frustrated.
He
Yeah,
didn't
sure.
want to, yeah.
Well,
And I get it. And I helped him, and
difficult.
I helped him, and he ended up getting it taken care of. And you know, I'm glad that it worked out. But I'm like, y'all gotta like start trying to, you know, do some work for yourself, because they're not just gonna come and, you know, no one's gonna come and tell you the different
Right.
types of therapy. Like,
Yeah.
if you want to know and you tried something and it didn't work, go to them and say, hey, take ownership of it and say, hey, this didn't work for me. This isn't helping me. It's actually making things worse. Is there something else we can do?
Right.
And if they're a good therapist worth their salt, they'll say, yeah, we can try these different things, but, you know, if they don't provide them, I know someone who does, or I can help you find someone who does. But in your experience, Kat, like, what are the different types of therapy? I know you do EMDR.
Mhm.
What are the different types of therapy, and how do they kind of work? And we don't need to get like super in depth into each one of them, but
Yeah.
can you describe how they're different and how they work?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think to kind of go back to what you were saying, you hear a lot from people is they've done talk therapy, right? And I think that that's where it gets a little messy and a little complicated because most people aren't understanding there's a variety of modalities that are in the talk therapy umbrella. And the idea behind all of those modalities is that the main thing that you're doing is you're talking in some way, shape, or form. And so, you know, the more traditional talk therapies that you hear about are cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT, dialectical behavioral therapy or DBT, which is kind of a branch off of CBT, but is slightly different. Um,
Could you kind of
internal. Yep.
explain those two just a little bit?
Yeah. So CBT is kind of the thing that gets pushed the most on therapists in grad school. It's the most widely studied modality of therapy. And the idea behind cognitive behavioral therapy is that we end up engaging in a negative spiral because we have these um, cognitive distortions, right? And so the easiest one is, you know, catastrophizing, which we all have a tendency to do, where, you know, one minor thing happens, but then your mind spirals and you're like, well, this happened. So that means this is going to happen. And then that's going to happen. And now it's the end of the world, right? Um, and that cognitive distortion leads to some type of negative emotion like anger or sadness or whatever it is. And then that leads into a behavior that's fed from that emotion. So I'm going to give up, I'm going to isolate, I'm going to rate, whatever it is, right? Um, and then the end result of that behavior reinforces the negative thought, right? Because it's like almost a self fulfilling prophecy. Um, and so the idea behind cognitive behavioral therapy is how do we interrupt that cognitive distortion and reframe it and challenge it into something that's more adaptive, that's more positive, so that you're not spiraling into these negative behaviors that are creating that feedback loop of see everything, you know, it never goes my way because this thing happened, but then I, you know, got angry and hucked something and now it's broken. And like again, just that type of pattern. Um, dialectical behavioral therapy is still um kind of based off of CBT in that it's a bit about challenging thoughts and thought processes, but there's different sort of modules to it. There's, you know, mindfulness, there's distress tolerance, which is essentially like, I can't change what's happening to me right now and it's making me feel some type of distress. So how do I manage my distress so it's tolerable? Um, there's interpersonal skills, right? How am I able to communicate effectively with the people around me? And then emotion regulation, which is, you know, exactly what it sounds like. How do I regulate my emotions so they're also manageable? Um, and so for both of those modalities, the main mechanism that you're doing in session is you're talking. Um, you know, and the bulk of therapy modalities will fall under the talk therapy umbrella. I mean, and there's so many. I'm sure, you know, when you're looking up those lists, you're seeing how many there
Yeah.
are. There's narrative therapy and IFS therapy and on and on and on. Um, and then you get into the other types of modalities that are alternative to talk therapy, things like EMDR or ART, or psychedelic-assisted, um, arguably is a little bit of both, I suppose.
What is
Um,
ART?
accelerated reprocessing therapy. It's a bit of an abbreviated version of EMDR in a sense, I guess, is like kind of the Spark Notes way to describe that one.
Okay.
Um, but what I see oftentimes with vets first responders, um, you guys are really programmed quite well um, to not have talk therapy be super effective, because you have already been trained and programmed to put all of the things that actually need to come out all the way in the back burner, and they're usually stored more in your body because you can talk about the things that you've done and seen a lot of the time, without it hitting anything. It feels neutral a lot of the time, because that's what you were trained to do is pack it up, on to the next task, on to the next task. And so it's extremely common for talk therapy to not work. And we often will use the description of like a top down approach versus a bottom up approach. If we think about the human brain, the bottom part is your like primal brain, it's your breathing, it's your body, it's your instincts, that type of stuff. And the top brain is your cognitive brain, your thought brain. And so a lot of talk therapies try to get to the somatic, to the body through your cognitive processes. And you guys are really great at like, yeah, 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 no, I'm fine. That's great. I can talk around you all day and I'm fine. Um, and so then we look at modalities that are more somatic based, like EMDR, and they're bottom up. So we're actually going the opposite way. And I actually don't really care about your thoughts all that much. And that's great that you can talk your way out of a paper bag. But we're not in a paper bag, and we're in your body, and we're really flipping the way that we're kind of getting in. And oftentimes that is what makes those modalities more effective for certain populations, because we're bypassing that cognitive wall altogether.
That's really interesting. Um, I'm a sexual abuse survivor from when I was younger. And in college, I went through like talk therapy. And it was interesting because like pretty much most of my life, like I didn't feel like that time of my life affected really anything
Yeah.
in me. And then in college, I sat in on like a session that one of the psychology professors was doing, and he he was going through like basically the symptoms of like how you can know if one of your clients um has been through sexual abuse. And I was like looking at that list and I was like,
Mm.
I'm
Yep.
like all of those things.
Yeah.
And I was like, and basically he was talking about how like this person needs help, like if they're showing all these signs. And I'm literally looking at this paper going,
Mhm.
Oh.
I think I think I need help.
Yeah.
Hypothetically, if someone were to match all of these, what should they do? Asking for a friend.
Asking for friends.
What's
Not
the high
me.
score on this list? Because I
Yeah.
just got
The only thing that I did not match was like I did not become and he even said, he was like, they either become like one of two things. They either go like completely they try to be risque and like and then or they go the opposite end and
Right.
try to become
Super
very like
modest.
homely,
Yeah.
more modest. And I was the one who kind of like fell into the more modest realm. Like I was like, and not to the extreme, but like but modesty mattered to me.
Right.
And anyway, so like I went through like talk therapy. So I literally went to that professor after that session and I said, I think I need help. And and so we did like talk therapy, and I felt like I was like, okay, like I'm good, I'm healed, we're all great. And then fast forward to we had 3 kids at this point. I was pregnant with our 4th, and all of a sudden I spiraled mentally, just completely spiraled. It felt like it was out of the blue. I
Mhm.
mean, now granted there was like postpartum
Yeah.
crap going on. And I went into like borderline postpartum psychosis and everything. And but it felt so out of the blue. Well, there was this lady who had, been at our church, and she was a licensed therapist and everything. She reached out to me because of things I was posting on Facebook. Reached out to me and like sent me a super direct message, and she said, "Lydia, were you one of the victims of so and so?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, how did you know?" And she's like, "I have helped like several of his victims, and based on the stuff that you're posting, like I've figured it out." And I was like, "Holy crap."
Hmm.
She offered to do like fast track therapy. Basically, we are going to meet and so we were living in North Carolina at the time. We were stationed in North Carolina. She was in Pennsylvania, and she basically was like, "We're going to meet every day for like 2 hours a day." And like I was up there for like what, 2 weeks or something. And she ended up doing EMDR.
Yeah.
And I don't get it. Like I don't understand. I don't understand why or how it worked. Like, and also what was interesting, she said she figured out that my trigger, what caused everything to spiral all of a sudden, was because our oldest son was approaching the age that I was when
When
the abuse began.
Yeah.
And it was like my body's response to, I need to protect him. I
Mhm.
need to, and it was just it, and it was all a like physical response
Yeah.
to, but I had no idea that that everything was rooted in what I had gone through. And and she did EMDR, and the crazy thing was that like, see, up until that point I had remembered just bits and pieces of the abuse,
Mhm.
but not the extent. And with the EMDR, it was like I was remembering smells
Eh.
and sounds.
Mhm.
Like I could, and it was wild because she could then she like and I kept telling her, I feel like I'm lying because I feel like my brain is remembering things. I was so confused by how all of these memories could come up. And I said, I'm so scared that I'm just making this up. I'm terrified that I'm just making this stuff up. And
Help at all, but even if you were, it actually wouldn't matter with EMDR. Sorry if I just like totally blew your brain out on that one.
well, thankfully she was able to like prove to me that I wasn't, because
Yeah.
thankfully, because I was remembering things that she was able to point to. Like, for example, I remembered like walking on like crinkling plastic, and I remembered the smell of wet paint. And because the abuse happened by one of the deacons of the church. Um and she said, "Oh my word, the church was going through renovations at that same exact time. There was plastic on the floor to protect the floors from the paint, and that section of the church was being painted." And thankfully, like a lot of the things that I was and now I know, because some of the other victims are dear friends of mine, and
Mhm.
we have since, long story short, a lot of this has come back up because this man, he's since been out of jail for a while, but now he is facing trial again, um, because of being a repeat offender, and I'm facing the possibility of having to go um,
Testify.
testify. And and a lot of us are finding, we've started talking about it, just remembering, and a lot of us have very similar stories about, what happened. But anyway, what was weird to me was just after I went through that 2 weeks of just like accelerated therapy, EMDR, and including EMDR, it was like I I was better. Not healed, not completely healed, but it was like I felt like I could finally just like handle life again. And I don't understand. Like, I don't get it. I don't get how it works.
Yeah. Is this where you want me to explain it?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't
Yes,
want to like
please.
jump in. Yeah. So okay. So I explain EMDR. So you know the Disney movie Inside Out. Hopefully they don't like try to like copyright you for this. That's the easiest way that I can explain it.
You know the one with the little bubble? Just don't say the name. The bubbles and the memories and the
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
cool clinking ball and the clinking.
Yeah.
Yes.
clicking balls.
So all of the child therapists rejoiced when that movie came out. So they're like,
Yeah.
oh my God, we have a
Yes.
cartoon. We can explain emotions to kids. I don't work with kids, so I'm sure they were really excited. I didn't necessarily care about that. I cared about the way that they depicted memory in the brain. And it sparked for me. I'm like, oh my God, I can use this to explain EMDR. And so if you think about us kind of going through our day, right? You know, in the movie, she collects these orbs and they're the different colors, right? This was a happy moment. This was a sad moment. This was, whatever. And at the end of the day, one of them hits that button on the floor and all of the memories from that day go out of, headquarters into that tube and into the shelves of long-term memory. And that's essentially what we do when we go to sleep every night and we enter REM sleep or rapid eye movement sleep. And so our brain enters a space of reprocessing where we're taking data points from the past, from a TV show we watched, from our day, from whatever. And we're working on reprocessing it so we can store it somewhere on those shelves that makes sense. And oftentimes what happens is something happens to us, and in EMDR we use the word trauma, but it doesn't just mean trauma the way that we usually think of it. It's not just a car accident or combat or those really heavy things. Of course those fall into the umbrella, but it's also what we call small t's or small traumas, where maybe you were bullied in school or you had really emotionally unavailable parents. um, or there was some type of repeated neglect or abuse that, a one-off incident wouldn't have been so bad, but it wasn't a one-off incident. It was consistent. And so that creates trauma in the brain and in the body too. And when that orb tries to go into the tube, your brain doesn't know what to do with it because it doesn't know where to put it because it's never experienced it before. And so it kind of just stays in the tube, because if the brain doesn't know where to put it, it's not going to just put it randomly. It's going to just kind of hold on to it. And oftentimes that first orb that got stuck was somewhere when we were really young, somewhere in our childhood. And oftentimes it's tied into a belief that we have about ourselves that's irrational. Like, I'm unlovable, I'm not worthy, um, I have to be perfect, I'm not safe, right? And then from then on, as you move through life, all these other orbs don't know which shelf they're supposed to go on, but they match this one over here that never got put anywhere. So they start to just make their own little pile off in the corner. And the easiest way to kind of describe the difference between something that's kind of stuck in that tube and something that's on that shelf is most of us can think about something that happened a few years ago that at the time was really upsetting. Like maybe you talked about it for a really long time. It took you a bit of time to get over a fight with a friend, a fight with a spouse, or, an incident that happened at work. But now, 5 years down the road, when you look back on it, you're not happy that it happened, right? You're not like, wow, I'm so glad that, that happened to me, but it feels neutral. It doesn't really bring anything up, right? As opposed to something that you think about maybe even from childhood. When you think about it even now in the present day, you're like, you know what? No, that still hits for me, right? And that's something that's essentially stuck in that tube and never made it into long-term storage. And so the idea behind EMDR is what we're trying to do is we're trying to recreate that reprocessing space that our brain naturally goes into. And that's where the eye movements come into play. We're trying to recreate rapid eye movement. Um, and instead of doing what your brain does when you're sleeping, where it's just, ADHDing and like, oh, I'm going to take this and I'm going to take that and I'm going to take that. We're asking you to focus instead on one of those stuck orbs, so we can try to reprocess that particular thing and not just whatever your brain feels like bringing into the mix. Um, and ultimately, the end goal of EMDR is for whatever that orb is to make it into long-term storage. And what that looks like is that you can look back on that thing that happened. And again, I don't want to say feel neutral in the sense of you're like, oh, I don't care that that happened, but it doesn't register anywhere. It's just that was a bad thing that happened. but I'm okay. And whatever that negative thought about yourself that was attached to it, whether it's I'm unlovable or I'm not safe or I'm not enough, it that voice changes too, where you can look back on that memory and say, that wasn't about me, or I did the best that I could, or I can make myself safe. Like that type of more adaptive thought process. Um, and that's kind of the best way that I can explain how it works.
I mean, it was okay.
Thanks.
No, that's I actually really enjoyed I really enjoyed that movie in general, both of them, just because they were really good as far as my limited knowledge and understanding mental health and just even personal experience and just watching it and being like, oh, that makes sense, and I've heard other therapists use that movie as well to discuss how things work and but I've never heard that description of EMDR, and that really helps. I read a book, The Body Keeps the Score. I don't know if you've read, I'm sure you have.
Yeah, I
Um,
have.
it's yeah,
It's a good
it's
book.
yeah, that's really really good. And he talks about how it takes it from this cluster of like junk in your brain and it kind of stretches it into like an event with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that way it's able to kind of rationalize it into something that happened and it has stopped happening and you don't have to keep revisiting it over and over again. Um, that was kind of that was the way that it had been described in the book, but I like your description better. Um, and it's a little easier to understand. Um,
Well, and I think I remember you even telling me that, because I had kept telling him, I'm like, I don't understand how the EMDR worked. Like I don't
it's
and
voodoo magic and I don't
I don't
like
know
it.
what's
This
happening.
witchery.
Yeah.
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 And
Sorcery.
and I was like, and I told him, I said, and I don't understand how why remembering so much of the abuse helped, because I was like, I would have been happy to not know, to not remember that much. And but he told me, he said, but those little pieces that you remembered, there was no sequence, there
Mhm.
was no beginning, middle,
Yeah.
or end, and so there was no end in your brain to even though that the abuse didn't continue, there
You're able
was.
to put it in chronological
Yeah,
order
he was like,
and
it allowed you to put it in a timeline and allowed you to have a finality of, like, I remember that this was the last time it happened. Like, I remember that this is when it ended. And, you know, now granted, it was the last time for me. It was not necessarily I mean, he just ended up moving on to somebody else, but it was the last time for me. And he said, he's like, and then he posed that as, maybe that was, it allowed you to have some closure almost.
Well, and again, I think like if we look at it from that bottom up approach, right? Like oftentimes we can experience these things where kind of like what you were just saying, Evan, like you knew cognitively, right, that it was done and it was over, right? But there was still a part of you that didn't feel it was over. And that's a lot of what I end up directing my clients to when we're doing EMDR work, is because they'll sit there and say, like, I know that I'm a good person. I know that I'm lovable. And I'll say, but do you feel lovable?
Yeah.
And that's where the answer shifts, because I'm not asking what your thought process is. I'm not asking you to walk me through the way you've tried to think yourself out of your trauma for the last however long. I'm asking how your body, how your soul essentially feels when you think about this. And that is always a different answer, right? We can talk ourselves out of a paper bag, but if we could talk ourselves out of our trauma, I wouldn't have a job and it'd be great. Yeah. And that's kind of like, to kind of what you were saying, like it happens a lot with clients where things start to come out of the woodwork and they're like, am I just making this up? Like, am I creating false memories? Like, is this like some weird voodoo hypnosis? And like, I'm going to quack like a duck every time I see a blue light from now on. Like, and the reason I say like, it doesn't really matter is because if your brain's made it true, that's all that I need. And that's all that
Yeah.
matters, because this isn't about me digging in and saying, well, is it really true that you were smelling paint at that point? If your brain thinks you were smelling paint, that's the only thing that I care about, and we're going to go with that and we're going to work through it. I've worked with clients who it's a recurring dream that's not real. It's, I call them shared memories, stories that aren't maybe your own memories, but you've been told them so many times they feel like they're yours. Like I have a
Yeah.
scar on my eyebrow from when I was 4, and my dad gave me a bungee cord, and I put one on my belt loop and one on the porch railing and backed up because I was investigating science. And what I learned is the bungee cord comes off of the porch railing and slams you in the face, and you start bleeding everywhere, and you run inside, and everyone loses their mind, and your parents think that your eye is gone, and your aunts and uncles are losing it. And that's not any of my memory, but I see it in my brain because my parents have told me so many times, and my siblings have told me so many times, and my family's told me so
Right.
many times. And I know what I looked like when I was 4, and I know what my house looked like at that time, and I can picture the porch railing in my dad's box truck. But that's a memory that I could do reprocessing work with, even if it's not necessarily mine, because my brain made it mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's really the power of EMDR, is I'm not going to sit here and tell you that your memory is wrong or that it matters if your memory is 100% correct. I just know that there's something in there that's still stuck for you. And it doesn't matter if the rest of it is necessarily true or not. We can still work with it regardless.
So then does the psychedelic stuff work the same way?
No.
That was where I was going next.
No.
So
No, no,
No.
sure does not.
No, it doesn't. So, um, psychedelics are, again, I guess, like an alternative to talk therapy in the sense that um, you're essentially administering, we call it the medicine, right? Either the ketamine, or in certain places you can utilize psilocybin or MDMA. What we know about psychedelics in general is just from a brain space, they increase the neuroplasticity in your brain, which is the super fancy way of saying it means that your brain can make different pathways. And I heard this on a different podcast forever ago, so I am not claiming the rights to this metaphor, but I've never heard a better one. If you're familiar with what happens when you go sledding, is, you go down a mountain and you put the sled down, and when you go down that same pathway enough times, it creates a groove in the snow. And so then at that point, if you decide to put your sled somewhere else, 9 times out of 10, you might start over here, but by the end, you end up in that same groove because it's so worked into the snow. And our
Yeah.
brain pathways are exactly the same way. We've been forming them literally since we were in the womb. Um, it's why infants can learn basically any language, but by age 5, half of those pathways have died off if they're not being utilized. Um, and so we create these really deep grooves in our brain of how we handle things and how we interpret things and what our emotional reactions are and kind of our lens for life. Um, and so the idea of psychedelics and increasing that neuroplasticity is, if our brain is that, snowy mountain, every time you introduce psychedelics into the system, it's a fresh blanket of snow. And so the deeper grooves start to become less deep. And what that means is now when you're, through the adjunct therapy that you're receiving, you're putting your sled over here, or you're trying it over here, or you're trying it maybe a little further up the mountain, you're less likely to fall into that groove because there's snow that's consistently falling on top of it. Um, and so it's not just about going out, macro dosing a bunch of psychedelics and just, living your best life. In general, studies will show that by introducing psychedelics into the system, you will traditionally see a relief in your symptoms, but you won't have the long lasting impacts if you don't have the therapy that goes with it, because the therapy
right.
is the one that's telling you, like, okay, we introduced this into your system, but we're going to move the sled. We're not going to keep moving the sled over here.
So
And
I don't
without
just
the
get to
adjunct,
eat a bunch of, psychedelic mushrooms and go on a trip and then be done and be healed.
so
I mean, it worked
you,
for a
Bummer.
you
minute.
could.
Yeah.
um, it's yeah, and so
I
it
actually just had, sorry, I had a lady
but
just like 2 days ago message me, and she's like, I'm about to get, some psychedelic treatment done. And she's like, what have you heard about it? Have you heard anything? And I'm like, I, I have heard very good things as far as from what I've heard. I was like, but I cannot tell you anything from personal experience. But I've talked to people that have said that Alex and the therapy that goes with it saved their life,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and So, I mean, and that's one thing that admittedly I've been very skeptical of.
For sure.
Because when I first heard about it, I was like, there is no way that microdosing LSD is going to be like, is going to help anybody. And I'm like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And when I talked, I think it was Aaron that I asked him when we were up in New Hampshire. I said, just talk me through like just the basics. Like, I don't need like the whole medical explanation, but like, how do you do it? Like, what is it even, and he kind of explained, in a medical setting, being microdosed and having someone guide you through it and, doing it properly. And I was like, okay, that sounds way less like 60s hippie vibe. Like, we're just going to shoot acid or we're going to drop acid and, and take a bad trip.
No, it's not like that. No. And I think realistically it's not even, so it's not a microdose and it's not a macrodose. It's actually, we call it a therapeutic dose. So with a
Okay.
microdose, the idea is that you don't feel the effect, right? Like you could microdose mushrooms and like still go to work and drive and, parent your kids, right? And the idea is that it's introducing the medicine into the system to give you the neuroplasticity benefits without, fully going into a journey, so to speak. A macro dose, right, is going to be something where you are like full blown, like you're in it to win it. You're in the journey, like
Yeah.
the end, right?
You are going to Mars.
And
Yeah.
so a therapeutic dose, right, is enough to put you into a journey, but not enough to like leave you there for like a prolonged period of time, so to speak. And what that journey time frame looks like is going to be different based on the different psychedelics, right? Like ketamine is a super fast acting psychedelic, so it's kind of in and out. As opposed to something like MDMA or psilocybin, where the amount that it's in your system is just it's longer just because of the fact that it's a different substance. And so, ketamine is the only thing that's legal in New Hampshire right now for psychedelic assisted. And so, I mean, in general, the ketamine's in and out of your system for a dosing session anywhere from like 45 to maybe 90 minutes if you have like a really slow metabolism that, hangs on to things for a while. Most people, I'd say by the 60-minute mark, the medicine's pretty much out of their system. They're out of their journey. But ketamine is also an anesthetic. So, like their fingers are still a little numb. It blurs your vision. So, I utilize eye masks, obviously, for, comfort and to kind of help you stay in your journey. And every single time at like the 60-minute mark, they're like, I think I'm ready to take it off. And then they're like, oh, no, no, no.
Abort.
Abort,
Send
yeah.
it back.
They always
So
try though, but
the one thing that I guess I'm still lacking understanding on is how does it, I know you administer the medicine, and I think I spoke, in talking with Aaron, he was talking about, and correct, I may be mixing up the conversations because I may have had this conversation with somebody else, but I feel like it was you, Aaron, about being guided through it by, the therapist. Is that it's not something where you just kind of send them on it and like let them kind of
Just let them
ramble, ride the
ramble.
let them ride the is that, or
Which
is it
sure
like
It is?
it
Oh,
sure
okay.
is. So,
okay.
in general, when you go through the training to be psychedelic assisted trained, that was English, sure.
Words?
The idea is that you really want to encourage the client's inner healer to guide the ship. And so the client is never in the space by themselves. So they, I'm in the room the entire time. Um, and it's certainly something that if a client kind of wants to take me along for the journey, as I call it, so, they're vocalizing like what they're seeing, what's happening, what they're feeling. I will just like leave them hanging and be like, oh, no, 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 this is for you. Good luck. I will see you in 60 minutes. But the idea is that we almost want to avoid doing that. We want to kind of allow the client to go inward and stay in their journey without outside interference, because that's when the inner healer can truly guide them. Um, and so uh, oftentimes the first session clients are a lot more vocal because everyone feels bad and they think that I don't know, going to get bored, I guess, because they're not talking and I'm just sitting there and I don't know what they think I'm doing. So oftentimes the first dosing session, they're very vocal and they kind of take me along for the journey. And then with further dosing sessions, they go more inward. And I've had sessions where the client is completely silent the entire time they're in their journey. Um, and so it is a bit of a mixed bag. So I wouldn't say that it's necessarily guided in the dosing session, but we do a lot of prep work before these dosing sessions of setting intention. What are the things that you maybe want to kind of give to your inner healer? Like, this is maybe some of the spaces I want to go, the things that I want to focus on. Um, and so we do a lot of prep work around that. So it's guided in that sense.
Yeah.
And then after the dosing sessions, we have what are called integration sessions. So that's where we kind of take the content of what kind of came out from your journey and how do we then integrate it, right? And how do we use that to move the sled somewhere else, right? What did we gain from this journey that's
Right.
informing you of what maybe needs to be different or what already feels different? And how do we expand on that? Right. Oftentimes clients will really experience this alleviation of especially depressive symptoms following the dosing session. Um, and the fear is always like it's not going to last. For a lot of people, it never did. And so that's what a lot of that integration work is. Of now that you're feeling the relief of these symptoms, how do we expand on that? How do we change things around to try and hold on to this, for as long as it's going to be here? Usually when we feel better, we act differently, we behave differently, we have more energy, we're doing different things. So, how do we realistically look at this stuff and start to incorporate it into your daily life so that the sled stays over here and doesn't go back, to where we started?
Yeah. And I think for my own stuff, with like having Cat as the guide or whatever was quite literally like I remember starting to wander and being like, so what door do I open? Because it was literally just a hallway, and I'm like, I'm lost. And she's literally was like, you already know which one. And I'm like, okay, well, that's gonna be fun.
Right.
You didn't warn me about this part of the story.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so it's just interesting. Like I like the analogy of the snow, like a fresh blanket of snow,
Yeah.
and allowing you to move the sled, per se, and move, the things that you're, I guess, not things that you used to be stuck in, and just the rut of, because I've used that analogy several times, just being stuck in a rut. It's like you're not broken, you're just stuck.
Yeah.
Sure.
And you've got to get out of that. My favorite analogy for that is a truck that's just buried in the mud. And it's
Mhm.
like the truck's not broken. It's just completely stuck. And you've got to get help to get it out. And once you get out of that rut and back on the trail, you're fine.
Well, and I think if
You
you kind of finish like or stay with that analogy, right? Like what psychedelics allow most people to do is to become a third party to what they're going through, right? Like, and again, in that space of you're the one whose truck is stuck and you've tried all the things that you normally would try and it's not working and you're getting frustrated, but then like someone drives along down, they're like, hey, have you tried this? And you're like, that would have been a really good idea. Right. But you couldn't access it in the moment, right? Because it's your
right,
truck and you're the one that's trying to get where you're trying to go and you're the one that's stuck, right? Like, and it really is like we can't always have our own solutions readily available because we're too far in it. And so what psychedelics allow us to do is to take that step back and to be able to look at a hallway of doors rather than, oh my God, these were periods of my life that were horrific and I didn't think I was going to get out of them and they're still there, right? And so it gives you that third party view so that you can be a little more curious about it and not be as stuck in it. And that's
right.
where a lot of change happens too, is because now you can see, oh my God, I could put the sled somewhere else. I don't have to keep putting
Yeah.
it over
Like, wait,
here.
I can
I don't
move?
have to go sledding.
I don't even have to go
snowshoeing.
sledding,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I could go snowboarding today, right? Like,
So in a
and
way,
so
it almost like creates like an aerial view of the situation, and then so it like allows you to see that there are other pathways and options.
yeah,
Like,
yep.
um,
Well, and I
that's
don't
really
know
interesting.
if when you were going through your EMDR stuff, but like when I did mine, like the first round through or whatever you call it, I was like in my body and reliving the moment, right? And then I don't know how many times we went around and around and around until I was literally standing to the side of the situation, looking at it like I was watching a 3D video, like what is that movie? Ghost of Christmas Past, where he's like taking Scrooge, like, look at
Yeah.
what you did in this scene, right? It was that exact, like, I was like outside of it. I was outside of the thing, looking back in at it. And that was,
They can't see us or hear us.
I can't see it. Yeah, exactly. And it was very similar to that, when I went through
You know,
the doorway.
yeah, it's interesting that you say that because, like, I distinctly remember the very first EMDR session, and, like, my whole body was literally shaking. I was nervous, like, I was practically sweating. It was like I felt like I was in it, I was experiencing it, you and it was and I had a hard time, because through the session, she was having me verbalize the things that I was seeing, the things that I was, and it was very hard to say any of it. And and there were times that I remember there were times I got really quiet and she said, Just say it. Just say what it is." And I was like, "No."
Yeah.
Hard pass.
And, but by my last session, I remember telling her at the end of the session, well, actually, no, it wasn't even the end of the session. It was like in the middle of the session. Um, I told her, I said, I'm worried because I'm not having any sort of physical response to this, and I feel like I'm just telling a story, and I feel like and that really concerned me because I told her, I said I feel like it has I feel like maybe it have never actually did happen. Maybe I'm just telling a story. Like, it worried me that I wasn't having a physical response to, but I guess that was like the proof that it was working.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
And I
that I
think
was
You're doing it right. Good job.
you're doing it right. And what I will say too is and again, EMDR is, I mean, new in the sense of modalities. Like it's, I think 30 to 40 something years it's been around.
yeah.
And it's kind of still evolving in the sense of new protocols are coming out and things like that. And there is what's called a blind protocol. And I'm not entirely sure when it came out. And not everyone necessarily uses it. There are a
Are you
good
talking
amount
about
of
like the blind spots?
no, so
Oh,
the
okay.
blind protocol in EMDR is essentially a way to reprocess without you ever describing or talking about what the memory was.
Okay.
Mm. And so I use it oftentimes with sexual assault survivors. I use it often with first responders and vets that struggle to allow poor civilian me to hear the things that they've seen and done. Because they don't want me to have to carry that too. And so essentially what it does is it allows you to still have all of the efficacy of EMDR without you ever needing to describe any of it to me. It's all utilizing like code words for what the memory name kind of is. And then it allows you to not have to describe, in between those sets where it's, what image comes up or what do you know, like those types of things. You don't have to do any descriptions for that. And that's a game changer for a lot of people too. Um, because that is extremely difficult. And, I commend you for going there with that therapist because I mean that is an extremely difficult thing to
Yeah.
vocalize. It's hard enough
Yeah.
to have it in your head, let alone say it out loud. And
Mhm.
there's so much shame that comes with sexual assault and parallel to that, combat and things like that. And that is really hard to push through in that space and kind of be vulnerable enough to share that stuff. So I mean, just I'm blown away that you were able to do that. And it just
I
speaks to
think
your own honestly, I think just resilience and just strength for that.
I think I'm naturally a verbal processor, and I think she recognized that in me, and because up until that point, my brain was trying to internally process, and it was not working, and I think that's one of the reason that was one of the reasons she was having me verbalize it, because it was like, if I didn't verbalize it, it would stay forever stuck, like, inside, and, you know, and I know that she wanted me to get to a point where I could verbalize it without it, like, creating a physiological
Yeah.
response in my body, and, my best friend who is also a victim of this same person, she and I, we were sharing our own stories with each other just because we both are facing the possibility of, going and testifying. And she said that she's like, Lydia, I don't know how you can like just blurt all. She's like, I'm listening to what you're telling me and I'm going, holy crap. And I told her, I was like, she was offered, she actually went to the same therapist. She was offered EMDR by that same therapist, but that same therapist told her, she said, in your case, because at the same time s- uh my best friend lost her dad at the same time that all of this abuse was going on. And so the therapist told her, she said, I am afraid that doing EMDR would, for you, may create more damage than, it would bring up too much, and it would overload your system. And um so she was like, a part of me is curious as to what I might remember if I do EMDR, but she's like, I think she probably made the good call to like to
Yeah, and I
not.
mean, it could get messy, right? And I think that that's again like this element of like what modality works best for somebody and what's going to make sense. And no one's trauma is the same, even if it's similar, right? And I think that when we look at complex trauma, right, and things that compound on each other because it's in the same family or just happened around the same time, it gets murkier. And I think that that's again like getting back into like how do you know that not only the modality is going to fit, but the therapist is going to fit too. Um, in terms of like their training, like I've been doing EMDR for 5 years. I don't know what year it is, 2026. Yeah. So like 5 years now, versus, someone who's been doing it for 10 years or 15 years, versus someone who's only, been doing it for a year. Um, and how often are they utilizing it with their clients? How well versed in this modality are they? So much kind of goes into those choice points. And I think that um, it makes it a hard question to answer of, there is no black and white. Well, if you have this, then this modality, or if you have that, then that modality. Because oftentimes a lot of it too, I have so many clients that come in for EMDR and then we start to get into it and they're like, no.
Yeah.
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 And traditional talk therapy ends up working even though it didn't in the past. And so it is a very unscientific
If
um,
you
situation.
had to choose one to start with for people that are just like they've just gotten the strength to say I really need help and they go to a therapist, like whatever one they go to just because either they were forced there by insurance or they talked to somebody who said you should try this person. They walk in the door and they're like, I have zero idea where to start. How would you what advice would you give that person?
Oof. My advice would be, how much do you trust the therapist you're sitting across from?
Yeah.
Is I think ultimately what it comes down to. EMDR is an extremely effective modality, and it has worked for a variety of my clients, vets, first responders, trauma, anxiety, you name it. Um, and I've also had clients in that those same demographics come in, and EMDR doesn't work because they don't believe in me, and it's hard to believe in a modality as funky and weird as EMDR.
Yeah.
Especially when you've done it and you know exactly what I mean. We're like, okay, like it's
Cast
really
your
hard.
spell on me, witch.
Like I 100% believe it would not have worked if I did not trust
Yeah.
the
Exactly.
therapist who was doing it with me. I mean, because it was already such a weird thing to me to begin with. And I was just like, what? Like, you want me to hold these
Yeah, the little
things that
vibrators. Yeah.
vibrate like that? I'm like,
I couldn't
it
do
was,
those in the light bar. I was like, nope, I have to close my eyes and just do the paddles because I'm not gonna. This isn't working.
Yeah.
yeah,
Anyone no idea what EMDR is literally just in their minds went,
Yeah,
what?
they're like these guys.
What? You want me to wait, what? It's
yeah.
fine.
Um,
Just look it up. It's fine.
look it
Google it.
up. Yeah. Don't look it up. Oh my God, no. The videos are terrible. Uh, no, I think it really comes down to, is your therapist somebody that you can sit across from and feel enough respect for that you can trust them to be next to you while you do what you're going to do, regardless of the modality and what it is. And I think that you don't have to like your therapist. I think most of my clients definitely reach a space where they're like, I don't really like you all that much right now. um, and not for nothing, my Marine clients come in and you're all big, bad, and tough, and ha ha ha. And then like 3 sessions in, when you're like, oh no, I am going down deeper than I thought I was gonna go. All of you ghost me for like a good 2 weeks. You're like, I think I'm fine. I don't think I really like her. I don't know that I like her all that much. You know, is there enough respect there and enough connection to that person you're sitting across from? Um, to have that trust. And I say to clients all the time, like, I don't need you to trust me with everything. I just need you to lend me some of it, just for the next hour. Right. We can figure out the rest of it when the time comes. But just for the next hour, I just need to borrow some of that trust just for right now. Uh, because I can't do my work if it's not there. And again, especially with these modalities that are a little outside the box, like EMDR, psychedelic, like without that connection, there's no way I'm getting anyone on board, even if it would be an effective modality for their symptoms or for, what they have going on. Uh, and so, yeah, I think that ultimately, I mean, across the board, whether your therapist has a license behind their name or 6 licenses behind their name, whether they're trained in a specific modality, it really just comes down to that trust and that connection. One of um, Aaron's brothers was talking about, he's seeing a brand new little baby therapist, but the connection's there, and they can open up with this person, and that was pretty much exactly what I said then. Of that, that's all that really matters.
Right.
And any therapist that's worth their salt is going to have hopefully that same opinion of that's where it starts is just, can you
Yeah.
give enough trust over to that person, to be curious enough to try a modality or to explore a modality and see if it might be a right fit for you. Um, yeah.
I got to interject and we can edit it out. I got to go pick up our kid because their nanny's not responding.
Yeah.
But
We're at the time limit anyway.
Yeah.
But
oh, okay.
Yeah.
no,
but-
it's okay. We're
yeah.
fine. I'm just letting you know. We want to
Fine.
respect your guys' time. I'm just letting you know it is 12:45. But
And then Kat also has, and I think it would probably be handy, but I don't know, to share like before, and you could edit it back in at the end of that last little bit. Your open letter to whatever would be pretty awesome with that.
Oh, you're gonna make me read
Yeah,
that?
it might be good,
Oh
might
my
be not. You can
God.
cut it out if it sucks, but I
Oh,
think it's one of
I
those
think
like
I should go get Grant.
I always do posts about like like this, that, and the other, and she's got like the response half of that, and
I cannot believe you just
you're
threw that
welcome.
in
You're
here.
welcome. You see the bus coming before I split.
yeah,
Oh,
right.
It takes her a second to read it, but it's pretty good, and you're not going to read it in like a cat. You're going to read it like a poetic way. Okay.
I can't believe you just did that to me.
Oh, I did. It's
I
actually
cannot
pretty. You
believe you
just
just did that to
just read
me.
the first little first little one. You got this. It'll be fun.
I can't even believe you just did that.
I'll catch up soon though.
Can I email it? I can just email it. I don't have to say it.
And
Well, yeah, and I mean, I lost my dad 11 years ago, and I think that there was a lot that happened in that time period in my life that in hindsight I can look back and be like, wow, that was all very much connected to that very sudden loss.
Yeah.
And so I can definitely understand, in relation to where your friend and that therapist were kind of brainstorming in that of like that would complicate a lot of things when it comes
Yeah.
to EMDR. And that is kind of a piece with EMDR is that we don't know what's going to come out. Right. And, kind of very similar to what you were describing, where like you weren't even aware of why you were feeling the way you were feeling. It just was
Yeah.
there. And that happens quite often, with EMDR. We kind of start in one spot and then inevitably it links back into this other thing. And, clients are oftentimes like, oh my God, I would have never assumed that that's, kind of what linked into this thing because it seemed so unrelated.
Yeah. 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 And I know that that's like the therapist I think she was more nervous that too many things would get muddled and they wouldn't really get to the bottom of exactly like what was going on. And so it was like they both agreed, okay, these tragic events, are part of your story, and so we need to help you figure out how to handle life beyond that, and um so yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the open letter.
Yay. Okay. So essentially, this came around from the idea, like kind of what Aaron was saying while I was still processing the fact that he threw me under a bus in the first place. Um, is like a lot of what the social media stuff that he tries to do with Labyrinth is it kind of tries to normalize, getting peer support, getting therapy, destigmatizing it through the lens of like he's not a professional, he's just a crayon eating marine grunt who was on an ambulance for a little bit and volunteer firefighter and stuff like that. And so how do you kind of bridge that connection with someone from that peer level? And it just got me thinking about like, at our peer support events, I'll try to go to as many as I can, um, to try and normalize therapists, especially for, the military first responder demographic. Like I am the Antichrist. Don't ever come near me. Don't talk to me. Don't look upset around me. Right. And so how do we kind of normalize therapists and like we're humans and like you can talk to us and it's okay. Type of a thing. And so just thinking about like I don't know, just how do we kind of incorporate that piece into the social media as well of like, how do I normalize me? Um, is how this started. And so I don't even know. So there's like two different parts, and I don't know that they're necessarily all together. The first one is kind of just from this perspective of like what therapy should be and what it should feel like. And then this second part is a little more so kind of getting into what I was saying a little bit about what I experienced with vets and first responders is there's this hesitation for them to fully go there in therapy because they're still trying to protect me because I'm a civilian and they don't want me to have to carry, what they've seen and what they've done, uh, and just still that deep bone of I can't put this on someone else. I have to carry it. Uh, so I can read both. I can read one. I don't know if you have a preference or not.
I don't know.
Maybe read both and then we can decide whether or not we keep both or we just use one.
That's the
You can
beauty of
just scrap
editing. We
both.
can
Yes,
edit
editing is
we can edit
wonderful. We can do
anything,
anything.
or we can include everything.
I hate all of it. Okay. Okay. I'm just gonna start. I'm just gonna read. I'm just gonna do it. Edit that part out. Edit the freak out. Okay.
Oh, we will leave the in.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate. Don't do that. I guess this is humanizing me in a way.
It is.
It is.
Okay.
100%.
So, to sit with veterans and first responders is to sit with lives that have been shaped by service, by moments where duty came before self, where purpose was clear and the cost was quietly carried. When the uniform comes off, the silence can feel heavier than the noise ever was. Questions emerge, like who am I now and what comes next? In this space, nothing has to be proven. Strength can rest, armor can soften. The therapy room becomes a place to set things down, memories, vigilance, grief, and to begin listening for what still calls you to move forward. Healing in here is not about erasing the past, but about weaving it into a life with meaning, beyond service, one that holds peace, connection, and choice. Here, purpose is reclaimed and rewritten, not in what you endure, but in how fully you get to live. This is a space for solace, for humanity, and for hope. That's the first part. And then the second part, which
Okay.
may not be part of the same thing. I am not fragile. You don't have to clean anything up for me. You don't have to leave out the worst parts or worry about what it will do to me. I can handle the blood and bone memories, those split second decisions, the moments that still kick the door in at 3 a.m. I know that trauma isn't poetic when you're living it. It's loud, repetitive, exhausting, and unfair. Bring the stories that don't land well out at dinner, the ones that make people uncomfortable, the ones you're convinced no one but a brother or sister could love you through. The anger, the guilt, the numbness, the part of you that doesn't actually want to talk to me at all. I won't rush you. I know trust is earned. I won't flinch. You've been trained to stay sharp in chaos. I've been trained to stay steady in the aftermath of it. When the adrenaline fades and the weight hits, this is a place where you don't have to be on. I hold the line while you dig into what still lingers, the questions that don't stop, the aches that don't dull. I keep the ground solid when things get messy, not to take your pain from you, but to make sure it doesn't take you from what still matters. I'm not here to save you or rewrite your story. I'm here to stand beside you while you figure out how to live beyond what you've seen and done and not just survive it. You've carried enough alone, and here you don't have to.
That was so beautiful.
That's
I really
that.
like that.
That was my half baked idea that just got thrown into the
Well, I
fire.
really liked that, and I'm glad he made you share
Thank
it with
you.
us.
Yeah, so I have no idea what's going to happen with that. Maybe it ends up on the podcast.
No,
It's
I would, yeah.
I feel like that's the perfect, like, closure to all of this. Um, that was really beautiful. Thank you for
Thank
sharing that,
you.
Kat.
Thanks. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it's
there's
no.
a lot of that addresses I mean, all of it, for men and women that are avoiding just therapy. Because I think sometimes the men and women that have gone through this, they cling to it because that's who they are. And it's become such an identity to them
Absolutely.
that they're afraid of that if they talk about it, they'll lose it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, and that sounds silly to someone who's not in that situation. It sounds like, why wouldn't you want to get rid of that? Why wouldn't you want to put it down? It's like, well, when that's what you've, built your life around, not because you chose to, but because you had to, it's resurfacing that is terrifying, and so
I think one of my favorite lines was, like, you saying it's just a weaving that into a better version of, it's like it's still a part of your story, and we're not gonna take that away. We're just gonna weave it into who you are now and make a healthier version of you with
yeah,
that being part of your story. And, like, that's so beautiful, and what you expressed in that, in what you wrote, it's trying to show people that, like, this is a safe space, like, that you're safe. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of what you're going to tell me. I'm not like, you know, you can lay this down and express it, um, and have it be handled safely. Um, so that was really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
And I think like that's kind of where some of that came from is, I think that like the first line that actually came from all of that was the one about you're trained to stay sharp in chaos and I'm trained to stay steady in the aftermath of it. Um and just thinking about it is a similar parallel in some ways. I've never seen combat. I'm never going to pretend that I have any reference, that's going to meet that. But sort of this same element of, you know, who I am at my core is someone who's going to shoulder it for people too. My entire career is dedicated around shouldering people's pain and their worst moments and their deepest shames and regrets so that they don't have to. And every vet or first responder I've ever met has that same bone in them of like, I will carry the weight of absolutely everything if it means my wife, my kid, my husband, my partner, my mom, doesn't have to. Um, and just really that kind of parallel in a sense. While we also miss each other entirely, because you guys are so, really trained to not trust us, to not go to us, and for good reason. It costs you your job. It costs you a lot. Um, and so that's kind of where that kind of originated from, was just kind of seeing some of those parallels, between those personality types that are kind of drawn like into these spaces. And it's also like not surprising to me most, vets end up becoming first responders or they go into mental health care and, things like that. and it makes them really good at it for exactly that
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Seriously, I'm glad you brought that up because it was really good, and I'd like to leave it in there. Um, but I'm really glad you guys came on. Um, I would love to have you back on at some point just to discuss other, get deeper into, I know, especially moral injury,
Hmm.
um, things like that. I know me and Aaron talked about that. I
Yeah.
know that you feel strongly about that as well from what he said.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'd love to have either you or him or both of you or one at a time, either way, just have you guys back on
Yeah.
just to get deeper into some of the stuff that we didn't have time to get into, as much
Yeah.
today.
Absolutely.
But I'm really glad you guys came on, and I'm really uh, just impressed with what you guys are doing and how you guys are doing it. And, I'm really looking forward to just staying in touch with you guys and,
Yeah.
continuing our friendship and see how it grows, in the
Yeah.
future. So
No, we were super excited to be on today. So I can speak for both of us and say that we would be very excited to be back. And this time he'll probably forego the GoPro. Maybe
yeah,
he won't. He's still going to try to make it the full thing, and it's
Well,
going to blow.
and
yeah,
I know we're gonna try
um,
to get
yep,
our mic situation figured out. It is
yep.
what it is.
We'll fight with it, and
This
it
is
may
just
end
it's
up
the first pancake.
That's
It
right.
never
yes,
turns out the best, but
right.
That's
we can get all
right.
right.
The girdle's too hot, and then now the
Exactly.
spatula wasn't sprayed, and but we'll figure
Yeah.
it out.
None of the things were quite ready, but you still made a decent pancake. You're still going to eat it.
Yeah, I'm still gonna eat it. Like it's still
Yeah.
gonna be delicious, and
Yeah. Exactly.
But again, thank you guys again so much for coming on, and we're really looking forward to having you guys back on. And thank you again for just doing what you guys do. And yeah,
Yeah, no, thank you for what you do. I mean, it's so cool to see the amount of people that your page reaches. So it's really awesome. And I know it's not necessarily the same, but you're making a huge difference too in the content that you're making.
thank you. But I hope you guys have a good rest of your week, and we'll talk to you again. Here soon. I'm sure we'll be in touch probably just in the next couple days.
Yeah.
Yeah. That works.
But it
Until
was nice
next
seeing you.
time.
Yeah, it was nice seeing you. Nice
Bye.
talking with you guys. See ya. Hey guys, quick reminder, if you enjoyed the episode today, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, go to whatever platform you listen to these podcasts on and leave a review. That's the best way to help us out. It gets a lot more traffic to us. So again, if you liked it, like, subscribe, and leave a review. All right, love you guys.